So we've all heard about it, right? The Semmelmann setup, right? The so-called pro setup where you got to jack the front end up and lower the rear end all the way down, right? That's supposed to be the best. Well, does that really make you faster? Well, in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the ride heights on the wing sprint cars, and we're going to be finding out whether or not it does matter if you have the front end up and the rear end down, plus a bunch of other combinations. Welcome everybody, Thomas Brandon here. Thank you very much for joining me. And like I said, we're going to be taking a look at the ride heights today. Now, the testing process that I used is pretty similar to the other tests that I've done before when we're looking at different things, comparing and using Motec, which we'll be doing today. Now, I have a few different combinations, and I did this on both a tacky track and slick track. We used a 15% for the tacky, and we used a 75% for the slick. Now, running the laps, I did what I normally do. I did 2 laps around the top and then 2 laps around the bottom. Now, one thing to note really quick is that when I was doing the laps on the bottom for the tacky, it was more of a slider type line where you really swoop down, get to the center and then really drive out nice and straight. Where on the slick track, because there was such a small amount of tacky, dirt around the bottom, you were really just rolling the bottom kind of through, almost like an asphalt car. So that is a little bit of a difference in terms of the line, but that's the only difference. Other than that, when you're running the top, it was basically just running the top. Now, looking at the setups real quick for this, what I did was, and if we look at the number 1 here, which is ride height test 1, for the tacky track, we did a 12 inches of stagger. We had the nose wing at 22, the top wing flat and all the way forward. And then what I did was, is I used pretty much what we've seen out there as what they call the Semmelmann setup, right? Which is basically you've got the easy up shocks, the 6.3 shocks on the front, a straight 5 on the right rear, 3.9 on the left rear, 1750 and 1350 for the wheel spacing. I did 6 gallons of fuel for the tacky track, basically like heat race fuel. And then for the slick track, what I did was I did 10 gallons. So I didn't do a full fuel load. I did it as if you had burned some off, right? Kind of setting the ride heights, because that's what I actually do, is I set my ride heights based on half of a fuel run for the feature. That's what we've got kind of for our test. Now, everything was the same, all right, when we were testing. The only differences were the ride heights. Okay, and so what I did was, is I did for both tacky and slick, I laid down a kind of a baseline, which was everything zeroed out on the torsion bar stops. And then we did, the front end up, the rear end down, front end flat, the rear end down. And then on the slick track, I actually did the ride heights that I use and compared them. And the data was actually pretty interesting. So if I actually bring up Motec here really quick, bring this over, and we take a look at our tacky laps, the numbers that we were really paying attention to, all right, and you can see here we've got the bar stops and we got the same corner weights, okay? The numbers that I was really wanting to pay attention to were the dynamic wheel loads, all right, the lateral and forward bite, right, or side bite and forward bite, and then also looking at wheel slip, downforce, and traction. So quite a few different things, okay? When we have the ride heights basically zeroed out and we compare that to our first one. Oh, and I also did where it was all the way down. So I lowered the entire car. So we have everything at 0 and then everything at -3. First of all, notice that there's very little difference. The corner weights are all the same, except for the left rear has about, 2 pounds more. That's it. Everything else is the same, okay? Looking at that, you can see that with everything zeroed out, all right, and we're looking at, we'll take a look first here at the 2 laps around the top, basically just, wide open, flat footing around the top. You can see that with our ride heights at 0, all right, on all 4 corners, we have a combined 977 pounds of rear force, okay? So that's how much weight we have to the rear wheels. Now, the split on that is 517 to the left rear and 460 to the right rear. Now, when we drop the whole thing down, we increase our weight on all 4 corners, our dynamic weight on all 4 corners by quite a bit. So you can see here that on our averages, right, When we look at the left front, at 0, 355, at -3, 381. Right front, at 0, 194, -3, 235. On the rear, uh, 0, 517, -527. And then on the right rear, 0, 460, -476. So we increased our corner weight everywhere. All right. And that gave us an additional 23 pounds of combined rear force. But when we look at our side bite and forward bite numbers around the top, there's not much of a change. We've only got a difference of 1 on the side bite, which is within the margin of error. That's really, I mean, that's basically driving style. Okay, there's a bunch of different factors that can affect that. And then we've got 3.5 to 4 on the forward bite. So not much of a difference. Looking at the lap times, they're basically the same, okay? Just about every one of these tests that I ran, all the lap times were in like within like a tenth of each other. So it's not like one was, screaming fast and then the other one was 3/10 of a second slower. That's not the case. Everything was basically the same. It was all within a tenth. The only time the lap times varied significantly was when the car was uncomfortable, when I didn't like the way that it felt. Okay. So when we get to the slick track, you'll actually see, because when it's tacky, you're just wide open and you're just trying to keep the thing straight, right? We're at Eldora. So it doesn't have much of an effect. Now, when we look at our next one, this is the classic front end up, rear end down, right? This is what everybody says you should run, all right? You can see corner weights, basically once again, the same with a slight variation on the left rear. Looking at the front weights, moving the front end up, we actually decreased our front weight. And then on the rear, we increased it significantly. Once again, we have increased rear dynamic load. All right. And when we look at our side bite and forward bite numbers, having the front end up and the rear end down, we increased our side bite, but we decreased our forward bite, and we actually decreased it by 5, which is that's actually starting to show a difference. Once you get past, 5, 6 around that, you're actually starting to see a significant difference. If we look at the wheel slip numbers, you'll notice that we actually basically kept things the same, and there's no variation in traction or anything like that. So it's basically just the bite, okay? Now, when we actually look at our laps around the bottom, now we actually start to see a little bit of a difference. So having our ride heights zeroed out, which are the colored lines here, we actually had better traction efficiency and less wheel slip. And we had increased side bite, but decreased forward bite. Okay? And keep in mind, the lap times, like I said, were basically the same. All right? They're 13.9, 13.9. So they're basically the same. When we go back to the load here, you can see that when we're running the bottom, we're really taking a lot of weight off the right front. We only averaged 97 pounds on the right front with the rear end jacked up. And on the rear, we had 23 more pounds of rear force. Okay. And that is basically what's giving us our increased forward bite. But like I said, we were 20 lower on the side bite. So a pretty significant difference. Now this goes to what I've talked about before when we look at weight transfer, right, and applied force. Okay. The higher the car, right, the more that the body can roll, the more that you can actually apply. Okay. You'll hear people talk about where having the car lower, right, is going to give you better cornering, or having the car raised up can give you more forward drive. That seems to be what's happening here, okay? So with the rear end low, what's happening is the weight's basically there. We're already we're already set, okay, for lack of a better term, going to the corner. So we're not seeing the increased lateral weight transfer because the car is lower, right? When it's higher up with everything at 0, we are. But then again, right, since we've already got that weight there and we're coming out of the corner, we seem to be getting better forward drive. Now, like I said, this did not equate to faster lap times, okay? They were within these ones on the fresh track were all within like a couple hundreds, okay, on the fastest laps. They were all right there. So it's basically just coming down to comfort, what feels best to you, okay, and what you can do the best with, what brings out the best of your driving ability. All right. Now, I did do one more on the tacky track. This was the front end up and the rear at 0. Okay. Once again, just a slight difference on the corner weight on the left rear. And then when we look at the actual dynamic weights here on the rear is basically the same. All right. We did have a little bit more forward bite, which has to do with the front end up, but our side bite was down, and that's around the bottom. When we look around the top, forward bite for the front end up was slightly better, about 5 better, and then our side bite was about 3 or 4 less. Okay, so kind of what we saw before with the front end up and the rear end down. Basically the same thing, just not as extreme. Okay, so on the tacky track, ride heights, it doesn't really matter. Okay, there's not an edge from what I can see. Now keep in mind your setup, right? The setup that you use with it, your shocks, your bars, your wheel spacing, your stagger, your gear, all of that can play an effect on how the car feels and what it's going to do with these ride heights. Okay, everything goes together. You got to think of it like a puzzle, right? You got all these different pieces that you're trying to put together that's going to give you a comfortable and fast setup that's built for you and your driving style. Okay, that's the key. It's not cookie cutter, right? I say this all the time. There's no unicorn setup. Your driving and how you handle the car has a big effect on it. You can take this setup and go out and drive it on the exact same track state with the same weather, everything, same line, and register different numbers, because if you're moving the wheel more than I am or moving it less, right? If you are a little bit harder, right? Maybe you open the car up more on entry, that can cause the setup to act differently, showing different numbers, okay? So that's the tacky. Now, on the slick track, we had a little bit of a different story. Now, the setup for the slick track, I'm not going to show that just because it was the insider setup for this week's, 360s here at Eldora. And so since that's a paid setup, I'm not going to show it. But just know that if everything was the same. Stagger was 11. Wheel spacing on the right rear was in to like 16. I had the right rear in a lot. I had the left rear out. But most importantly, I had the top wing at 30 and I had it at -5. Okay. So since the track was 75%, right? 80%, something like that, it was a pretty slick track. And so I had that wing increased and moved, to the middle of the car. Now, as you can see here on the corner weights, all right, with everything zeroed out, our numbers on the slick track are pretty good. The car felt pretty comfortable around the top. I was able to hold the throttle close to wide open through most of the corner. I would lift a little bit, get the car in and set, and then roll back into it. So the car felt pretty good. Really balanced. That was one thing that I noticed. You can see here on our rear weights on the left and right rear, we averaged 518 and 517. So basically good even drive coming out of the corner. So that was actually a really nice surprise. And then when we compare that to the next one, which was everything lowered, this thing felt like crap. Okay, so when the car was dropped all the way down on the tacky track, that didn't matter. Uh, on the slick track, it just felt like crap. The car was twitchy. I could not stay in the throttle. The car just felt like it almost felt like it had too much grip. And what I mean by that is every little turn of the wheel, the car would just dart. All right, it was really, really twitchy. It wasn't comfortable at all. Not only that, when we look at our numbers here in terms of our side bite and forward bite around the top, big drop. So we lost, almost 10 on our side bite, and we lost like 30 on our forward bite. Significant drop. So, don't drop the car all the way down when it's slick. All right, it's not a good idea, especially if you're going to run the top. Now around the bottom, once again, pretty similar story. So the car definitely felt better around the bottom, but it wasn't good. Okay, it's kind of comparing horrible to bad, that type of thing. So around the top, it felt like junk. Around the bottom, it just felt bad. When we look at the numbers once again, we lost, quite a bit of side bite. We also lost quite a bit of forward bite. So, dropping the car all the way down on a slick track, not a good idea. I would not recommend doing that. Okay, I would absolutely stay away from that. Now, putting the front end all the way up and the rear end all the way down, a little bit of a different story. So, when we look at our 2 laps around the top here really quick, you'll notice that once again, we see kind of the same thing we saw before. Okay, we've got the different dynamic weight up front and increased dynamic weight on the rear. Now we actually increased the left rear quite a bit. I was actually surprised by that, by how much we increased that left rear in terms of the dynamic weight, especially when you look at the fact that our static weights when we're sitting in the pit are exactly the same. So definitely a lot more dynamic weight doing that. But when we look at our numbers around the top and around the bottom, side bite the same, forward bite the same. It was less than 2 on our side bite. So it's within the margin of error. Now I will say this, running the car this way, it wasn't as comfortable as having the bars all zeroed out. The car felt a little twitchy. If you hit the line correct, it felt pretty good. But if you missed it, it was bad. Not only that, with the rear end dropped all the way down like that, especially running the top here at Eldora, if you went over that cushion just a little bit, the car would bottom out. And it just, at that point, it would either bottom out and suck you into the wall, or you got your right rear up there and then the car would just want to snap and knock you off the cushion, right, where you fall down. I'm sure you've all felt that before. So it wasn't very comfortable. Lap times, once again, basically the same. They were all within a tenth. Okay, it was just a matter of how comfortable the car was, and this just didn't feel that comfortable to me. Now, when we look at things like wheel slip and traction and downforce, basically the same. Okay, our traction efficiency is the same. Our wheel slip is basically the same. It's within 1, so it's within margin of error. Same. So, everything is basically the same in terms of the data, right? There's no edge. It really comes down to comfort. That's the key, comfort. If you're comfortable driving the car like that, then by all means, do it. Okay, do it. I mean, because it's just going to be comfort. Okay, there's not some disadvantage. It's not like you're missing out on speed. Okay, it's not like, oh, I don't have my front end up and my rear end down, therefore I cannot be as fast as driver X. That's not the case. You can be as fast as any of them. It's all going to come down to how you drive. Looking at the next example here, where we've got the car with the front end up but the rear end at 0. Once again, corner weights, identical. All right, our static corner weights are identical. And when we look at the dynamic weight here, we have a little less weight on the front, and then the rear is pretty much the same. We're only got a 4-pound difference on the right rear. So not much of a difference. Our combined rear dynamic weight, basically the same. And then lateral our lateral weight transfer, our side bite and forward bite, that's where it actually gets different. So when the car's zeroed out, the side bite is actually a little bit more running the top. But having that front end up gives you more forward drive. You get more forward bite. Now, this is around the top, okay? When we go to the bottom, where now we're actually on and off the throttle. And remember, like I said, when I was running the bottom on the slick track, it was pretty much like an asphalt car. You're driving it in, rolling out the throttle, getting to the center, and then rolling back in, coming out under the slick nice and straight. We saw increased forward bite with the front end up and decreased side bite. So once again, it's all about balance. What's comfortable for you, what fits you. Okay? Because like I said, lap times were within, a tenth of each other, right? Also, I have been turning quite a few laps, so the track was slowing down, but I went back and retested the setups, to make sure that the fall off was consistent, and it was. So We were within a tenth the entire time, okay, on the slick, with the exception of everything being dropped down, okay? That was the one setup that it just sucked on the slick track. It was just horrible. Don't do it, okay? It's horrible. But with this, it was basically the same, okay? It was basically the same. Now, feeling wise, the car did feel pretty good. It felt better than having the front end up and the rear end down, but it didn't feel great. Having that front end all the way up, whether you've got the rear down or not, can really make the car feel twitchy, okay? So, what happens, as you can see here, our dynamic weight drops quite a bit. What happens when you raise that front end all the way up on a slick track is that you start taking the weight off the front end. It's just being applied to the rear. And when you're on a track like Eldora where it can get kind of bumpy, what can happen is if you get up there and you've got a front end that's really light, particularly the right front, is that you're losing when the wheel is bouncing like that or it's really light, you don't have grip on it. Okay? You don't. Always remember, you can only go as fast as your slowest wheel. You've got a wheel in the air. Guess what, man? If that was the fastest way to drive, you would see more cars with their front wheels in the air. It's not. Okay, that's not a good thing. You want all four corners planted. Okay, grip, traction, that matters. So, having the front end dancing all over the place is not the best thing in the world. And when it's doing that and you're on the wheel, what happens is now when that thing finally does touch down, if you're turning that wheel, it'll snap on you. And that's what causes that twitchy feeling in the car. So having the front end all the way up like that, you know, on a tacky track, right, feels really good for me. Okay. On a slick track, not so much. I don't really like it. Now the good news is, like I said, you're not being punished for it. Okay. You don't have to have the car that way to be fast. So it's all a matter of comfort. Once again, I'm going to say that over and over and over again. And that's a really good thing because it's on you. It falls on you. So running those bars at zero seem to actually be really good on the slick track. Now, if we look at that setup real quick, okay, just to kind of take a look at it really quick, you can see that it was 14, 15, 3, 14 and a half, and 13, 1. That was the ride heights. And that's actually fairly close to what I run. So just a turn here, a turn there can make a huge difference in terms of what we see on the numbers. But once again, keep in mind that comfort has a lot to do with it. All right, it has a lot to do with it. That zeroed out ride height setup felt really, really good to me. I was actually shocked at how good it felt. Okay, especially with that shock package and everything that I was running. I was really surprised at how good that felt. So, what you need to know, all right, to bring this all around and just tie a big bow on it, is this. Your ride heights, right, are in conjunction with everything else that you're doing. And ultimately, it comes down to comfort. There is no secret sauce with the ride heights. Okay? Understand that. You don't have to have the front end jacked up and the rear end dropped all the way down. You don't have to have that to be fast. Yes, there are a lot of drivers who do it. Yes, there are a lot of pros that do it. No, you don't have to do that to be one of those drivers. You don't. You absolutely don't. Okay? I have raced with those guys before. I have seen those guys' setups, all right? I work with pros, okay? And I've raced with a lot of them. You don't have to have that stuff to be fast. You don't, okay? I've outqualified them using my setups, okay? It's few and far between, okay? I beat them in heat races, all right? I beat a couple of them in features, and I haven't done it. I can count on one hand how many times I've done it, right? But I have done it, okay? And the thing is when they're beating me, it has nothing to do with they have a better setup. They've got the magic setup. It has to do with the fact that they're just flat out better than me. That's what you need to know. Okay? So when you're out there building your setups, build it for comfort. Build it so you can be smooth. Do that, and the speed will come. All right. So that's going to do it. Now, really quick, do me a favor before you go. If you like this, please hit that like button. I know another YouTuber on here saying hit the like, share, and subscribe button, but please do it if you can. It does definitely help out the channel. It also helps out the community, and it helps out other sim racers out there, right? Share this with them. Let them see it. Get them some help so we can get them on the right track, getting them faster, right? SSR has grown. In the Discord alone, we've got almost 2,000 people, which is awesome. We have helped a ton of people, and it's just made the racing that much better. Okay, so please like, share, subscribe, get this out there to everybody. Also, like I just said, if you want to actually join the School of Sim Racing Discord, I'll have a link down in the description below. It's free to join. You can come be a part of what I think is the best sim racing community there is online today, period. It's not even close, but then again, I'm a little biased since it's my community, but come check it out and see for yourself. Okay. Also, lastly, if you want to join me, I do live stream on Twitch Wednesdays and Thursdays, sometimes on Tuesday nights, but I live stream our league races. It's a ton of fun. We have a great group that comes out, and it's just a lot of fun. You can come out and ride with me while I'm racing, see me build setups, hear me talk about, why I'm doing stuff, what I'm doing, and I run everything from wing sprints, non-wing sprints, midgets, big block modifieds, late models, I mean, all kinds of stuff, right? Basically every dirt car but legends and street stocks. So if you want to check that out, link down in the description below. Oh, and then one more thing, I almost forgot. I built new free setups for the 360 and 410 wing sprint cars. Okay, so I just built brand new free setups for all of the tracks, okay, for the wing 360 and wing 410. If you want to get those, obviously they are free, but you got to get them in the Discord. That's the only way to get them, is in the Discord. So join the School of Sim Racing Discord. Like I said, I'll have a link down in the description below, and then you can get all of those setups. Okay, so that'll do it. Thank you as always for joining me, and until next time, I want to wish you good luck and good racing. Take care.